Hey y'all, welcome back, and today we have the May June 2026 CAPE Economics Unit 1 Paper 2. Let us get into it. So Module 1, the methodology, demand and supply. Number 1, Part A. We have to define each of the following terms. Scarcity. Now, scarcity is the inability to satisfy all humans' wants because resources are limited, while human wants are unlimited. As a result, individuals and societies must make choices about how to use their scarce resources. Economic good. An economic good is a good that is scarce relative to demand and therefore has an opportunity cost. It requires scarce resources, that is, the factors of production, to produce and usually has a price because people must pay for it. Now, some common examples of non-economic goods include air, sunlight, seawater, natural rainwater, and unpatented ideas. Okay, these are ideas that is not the rightful ownership of any company or design in a sense. So, for example, Apple, they may patent a specific design on their new iPhone, and they didn't want their competitors to be copying these designs, so they could patent it. But if it is unpatented, then it is not an economic good because the resources that is a factors of production are not in use, right? It's not scarce. It is already there. So these resources don't have any competing use since anyone can consume them without depleting the supply available to others. Part we want to see use a well-labeled long-run average cost curve and to illustrate how economies of scale changes. Now, in the long run, right? In the long run, all the factors of production are variable. Allowing firms to adjust the scale of production. Therefore, firms will have a long-run average cost curve that is a U-shaped because firms initially experience economies of scale. This occurs because the firm benefits from factors such as specialization, bulk purchasing, managerial efficiency, and improved technology. Then constant return to scale, right? Since the firm has reached its minimum efficient scale, MES, where it is operating at the lowest possible average cost. And finally, this economies of scale, which is caused by problems such as communication difficulties, coordination issues, and managerial inefficiencies, right? So with that in mind, we're gonna have a curve shaped like this, okay? We're gonna have an average variable cost on our y-axis, which is a vertical line, and our output we have is on the x-axis, right? As you can see, this is the U-shape. In blue, that is a long run average cost curve. Here is the economies of scale. This section right here, this part gonna be the constant returns to scale, and right here will be the diseconomies of scale. Okay, all right. This is showing the fact that as you increase production from Q0 to Q1, your average cost decrease. From Q1 to Q3, your average cost remains the same, however, your output is increasing. And from Q3 to Q4 and beyond, the average cost starts to increase. That is why this section right here is at these economies of scale. Part 2 wants us to distinguish between internal economies of scale and external economies of scale. Internal economies of scale are cost savings that arise within a firm as it expands its scale. They result from the firm's actions, such as, again, specialization, bulk purchasing, managerial expertise, marketing, finance, and research and development. Conversely, external economies of scale are cost savings that arise from factors outside a firm due to the growth or development of the industry, or the surrounding environment. They result from external factors such as improved infrastructure, which is usually provided by the government, a larger pool of skilled labor, and the development of supporting industries. So the agglomeration, the togetherness, the bringing together of firms, okay, that somewhat benefit from each other is like a symbiotic relationship. Part C, right? Part C, with the aid of a well-labeled diagram of the market, explain how a subsidy to farmers impact the market equilibrium for tomatoes. Now, a subsidy. What is a subsidy? A subsidy is a financial payment made by the government to producers to reduce the cost of production, right? That is the main focus of a subsidy, to reduce the cost of production. Additionally, the effects of subsidies are that farmers, in this case, farmers receiving government financial assistance, which helps offset production costs and encourages continued production, and consumers benefiting from lower prices and greater availability of tomatoes, which arises due to the government bearing the costs of financing the subsidy through public expenditure spending earned mainly through taxation, right? So the subsidy is usually funded from taxation, the public purse, in other words. Now, this form of government intervention is consistent with the ways in which they influence markets in mixed economies. So, for example, the US would be a good example of a country that likes to subsidize its agricultural industrial sector in order to be more competitive domestically and internationally, because there are other players who are competing for customers as well, who are competing for revenue, market share. Now, this is our diagram right here. On our y-axis, which is a vertical line, we have our price, and on our x-axis, we have the quantity supplied, okay? Now, why quantity supplied? Because supply is being affected here, right? Cost of production, to be more precise, is being affected here, which is a determinant. It's a non-price determinant of supply, okay? Okay. As you can see, we have our demand curve in the orange. We have two supply curves. One is shifting down to the right. We have a price, which is going to be shifting from P star to P1. And we have our quantity, which is going to be shifting from Q star to Q1. Okay, and this is our equilibrium here, E star, which has been changed to E1. Okay. Now let's see the explanation, right? So initially the market is in equilibrium at E star, where the original demand curve D star intersects the original supply curve S star. The equilibrium price was P star and the equilibrium quantity was Q star. When the government provides a subsidy to tomato farmers, their production costs decrease. Since production becomes more profitable, farmers are willing and able to supply more tomatoes at every price, right? Every price level. As a result, the supply curve shifts rightward from S star to S1. As a result, the new supply curve intersects the demand curve at E1, creating a new market equilibrium, right? So this right here is our new market equilibrium. And that is it. Moving on. Module 2, market structure, market failure, and intervention. 2A, distinguish between public goods and merit goods. Now, public goods are not provided efficiently, right? Just putting that out there, by the private sector because of the free rider problem, making it difficult to earn any profits. Merit goods are goods that are underprovided because of information failure and a weak private demand. So governments often subsidizes or provide them directly. Public goods are non-rival and non-excludable. meaning one person's consumption does not reduce availability to others, and people cannot be excluded from using them. For example, street lighting, street sign, and national defense. You can think about the police force. Conversely, merit goods are goods that generate positive externalities and are underprovided and underconsumed in a free market because consumers underestimate their benefits, for example, education and healthcare, right? You receiving education and healthcare is not just benefiting you, but the wider society, okay? Part B, we want to explain the concept of market failure. The market failure occurs when the free market fails to allocate, in other words, share, resources efficiently, resulting in a loss of economic welfare. It arises when goods and services are overproduced, underproduced, or not produced at all, leaving society's needs not fully met. Also, it is usually caused by monopolies, public goods, merit goods, demerit goods, externalities, or imperfect information. They want us to identify two examples of market failure. Now, two examples of market failure are over and or under produced public goods and negative externalities. Yes, these two are examples of market failure. Now, they want us to list four causes of market failure. Four causes of market failure include imperfect market structure, externalities, public goods, and imperfect information, that is information failure. Now, the reason why, right, these causes are market failure is because of this. An example of a market failure will become a cause of said market failure, since the initial inefficiency sets off a chain reaction, leading to further misallocation of resources in the marketplace. Okay? So an example of a market failure become a cause. Keep that in mind. Part C want us to discuss how firms can use each of the following interventions to correct market failure: voluntary agreements, corporate code of conduct, and corporate social responsibilities. Right? Now, this section requires you to be creative, flexible with your response, right? You have to discuss on these 3 points in detail, right? So give it a little bit of your own creativity in terms of how you're going to describe or discuss these 3 points here, okay? But I have some general points that could be useful for you. So firstly, voluntary agreements are arrangements made by firms to reduce harmful business practices without government enforcement. By cooperating voluntarily, firms can reduce negative externalities such as pollution and waste, improving market efficiency. For example, manufacturing firms may agree to reduce carbon emissions, recycle waste materials, or use environmentally friendly production methods. Firms may also voluntarily cooperate with regulators to meet environmental targets before legal action becomes necessary. Secondly, a corporate code of conduct is a set of ethical rules and standards that guide how a business operates. It helps prevent market failure by ensuring firms act responsibly towards consumers, workers, and the environment. For example, a code of conduct may require firms to deposit of waste safely, comply with health and safety regulations, avoid false advertising, and prevent bribery, insider trading, and other unethical practices. Furthermore, these standards reduce information failure, protects consumers, lower negative externalities, and increase public confidence in the market. Lastly, corporate social responsibility refers to the voluntary actions taken by firms to improve the welfare of society beyond making profits. Also, it helps correct market failure by ensuring businesses consider the social and environmental effects of the actions or activities. For example, ensuring products are safe for consumers, providing clear multilingual safety instructions, that is, whether it's in English or Spanish, and expiry dates, recycling waste products, and supporting environmental conservation and community development. Additionally, it also enhances a firm's reputation while promoting long-term sustainable economic development. Module 3, Distribution Theory. 3A, Part I want us to explain the concept of derived demand. Now, derived demand is the demand for effective production that arises because there's a demand for the goods and or services that the factor helps to produce. In other words, a factor is demanded not for its own sake, but because it is needed to produce another product that consumers want. They want us to state in part 2, one example of derived demand. So one example. So for example, the demand for mechanics is derived or comes from the demand for vehicle parts or repairs, I should say. As a result, more people need their vehicles repaired. Garages will hire more mechanics. So if people want their vehicles repaired because it breaks down regularly, they will garages or people or business owners who own garages that employ people will decide to hire more employees or mechanics to work on these vehicles. Okay? Yeah. Part B, explain the concept of compensating wage differential. Compensating wage differentials are wage differences paid to workers offset the advantages or disadvantages associated with particular jobs. For example, miners and oil well drillers often receive higher wages because of the hazardous nature of the work, and a teacher may accept a lower salary if the school offers excellent working conditions, job security, and is located close to home. Yeah. Part 2 on this outline three sources of compensating wage differentials. Firstly, jobs that expose workers to high levels of risk, such as miners, oil well drillers, or drivers transporting radioactive materials. The higher wages to compensate employees for the danger involved. Secondly, employees who must work in isolation or remote areas often receive higher wages to compensate for the inconveniences, lack of social interaction, and distance from family and services. That is whether they need to be attended to medically. Lastly, jobs requiring extended hours, night shifts, or irregular schedules generally offer, right, higher pay to compensate workers for the inconvenience and disruption to their personal lives. So, for example, a nurse on call. So, usually here in Grenada, right? When a nurse is on call, that means after they are finished working their regular 8 to 5 or whatever the time range is, if they are on call, they have to stay home and keep their phone with them so that whenever there's a call or someone calls them, they have to attend to that emergency, right? The ambulance will come to pick up them so that they can go to the emergency that had occurred. Okay? Now, the reason why these nurses are gonna be compensated, don't get me wrong, they'll be compensated for that because it's out of their regular working hour. Now, the reason why this is occurring is because nurses are considered to be what? Essential workers, right? They are essential workers. That is why usually they're gonna be compensated more, okay? Because it keeps society running the way it is. It keeps society running smoothly, okay? So let's keep that in mind. And if you wanna pursue a career and it's in the medical field, then there's a high possibility of you making money because you are essential. But let's keep in mind that your time will be very, very valuable and very, very much demanded of you. Part C wants us to discuss how each of the following government measures can help alleviate poverty. So we have free education, subsidized housing, and minimum wage legislation. Firstly, free education helps to alleviate poverty by increasing access to knowledge, skills, and training. Okay? Knowledge, skills, and training, especially for low-income individuals who may not be able to afford schooling. Education also improves human capital and makes individuals more employable, allowing them to obtain better paying jobs and increase their income. Additionally, free education also creates positive externalities because a more educated population can increase productivity and contribute to economic growth. Secondly, subsidized housing helps reduce poverty by making shelter more affordable for low-income households. Also, since housing is a basic necessity, government housing programs can provide safe and affordable homes for individuals who may otherwise live in poor conditions or crowded areas as squatter settlements. As a result, by reducing the amount of income spent on rent or housing, families have more disposable income available for food, healthcare, education, and other necessities. Lastly, minimum wage legislation helps alleviate poverty by setting a legal minimum income for workers, preventing employers from paying extremely low wages. By setting a legal minimum wage, the legislation increases the earnings of low-paid workers and improves their ability to afford necessities such as food, housing, and clothing. It also helps to distribute income from higher income groups towards lower income groups of workers, reducing income inequality and improving living standards. But we should keep in mind that trying to establish a legal minimum wage, now this measure only works, or it will only be effective if the necessities do not increase in direct proportion to the legal minimum wage, which is usually set higher than the market rates, since cost push inflation can occur. So paying wages or salaries to workers is a cost of production. And if a profit seeking firm, because you know firms are rational, they are driven by the profit motive, right? If the cost of production increase, then they will pass on the cost of production to the final consumer. Okay. Now this can set off a whole chain reaction where everything increase in proportion to that wage increase. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. So we got to be very careful. Governments have to be very careful as to what they are doing with the minimum wage. If it is necessary, or if it is needed, if it's needed, okay, if it's needed, then sure. If the wage rates have not been increased for over 25 years or 50 years, and sure, go ahead. It's a wonderful thing to do. However, if you always increasing it every 2 years, then that doesn't make sense. Inflation will occur, okay? Because the more you give them money, the more you give people money, the more they will spend, okay? And spending excessively can cause inflation. And that is it for me today, guys. See you all next time.